بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا صاحبي السجن أما أحدكما فيسقي ربه خمرا وأما الآخر فيصلب فتأكل الطير من رأسه قضي الأمر الذي فيه تستفتيان وقال للذي ظن أنه ناج منهما اذكرني عند ربك فأنساه الشيطان ذكر ربه فلبث في السجن بضع سنين صدق الله العظيم. Honorable, respected elders, brothers and sisters, these are the same ayat that we looked at yesterday at the end of the discussion between the cellmates of Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam and the Prophet of Allah Yusuf alayhi salam himself. It was an interesting encounter, a dream that they shared with Yusuf alayhi salam, seeking for the interpretation of the dream. And Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam offered the interpretation by saying, Ya sahibai as-sijn, amma ahadukuma fayasqi rabbahu khamra. Or one of the, inmates of the prison, as far as one of you is concerned, فَيَسْقِي رَبَّهُ خَمْرًا, he will be released from the prison and will be reinstated to the position that he was in before and will be serving the wine to the master. And as far as the other one is concerned, he will be crucified, hung to death, and his body will be left to a point that there will be birds eating off his head. وَأَمَّا الْآخَرُ فَيُصْلَبُ فَتَأْكُلُ الطَّيْرُ مِنْ رَأْسِهِ قُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ الَّذِي فِيهِ تَسْتَفْتِيَانِ. And then he said that قُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ, the matter that you are asking about, inquiring about in terms of the interpretation, قُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ, it has been decreed and decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means that it is not something that human being can change and alter. That's the qadr of Allah for two of you. One will be set free, the other one will be destined to die. And as I mentioned yesterday, knowing something as firm as this, as part of the qadr, that your life is going to end very soon, and the reaction to that could have been and would have been definitely very difficult for the person to bear with. But of course, nonetheless, the Quran says that Yusuf alayhi salam informed and then he asked the one who was going to be set free to make mention of me with your master, the king that you will be serving. اذكرني عند ربك فأنساه الشيطان. And of course he promised, he committed, and as he was released, obviously for reasons as a human being he forgot. And ansahu shaitanu, it refers to as an act of shaitan for him to forget this, because what Yusuf alayhi salam had asked him for was an act of kindness, something which was noble in essence, because somebody who was innocent serving the sentence in the prison, right? To set the person free from the prison is going to be definitely a noble deed, and therefore when something like this is to be forgotten, it possibly could be because of an act of shaitan. فَأَنْسَاهُ الشَّيْطَانِ. And it is very much the same phrase that we see in Surah Al-Kahf, when Musa alayhi salam with Joshua, Yusha bin Nun, his student, they traveled together, in the pursuit of ilm, seeking knowledge, to meet Khizr alayhi salam. And obviously on the way they had some supper, the meal with them, tiffin, so that they could eat along the journey. And part of the meal that they had was the fish. and suddenly the fish became alive, although it was cooked, because that was to serve as the sign of the meeting of the two groups. And when that happened, Musa alayhi salam was resting, and Yusha bin Nun, was, subhanallah, awake and monitoring the journey. But as the fish became alive and suddenly jumped off the container and made its way right in the ocean. And it was here, it's supposed to be the point for them to look for Khizr to meet. But then they crossed, and when Musa alayhi salam asked, where is the meal that let's eat? And then I forgot, Shaitan made me forget to tell you that it happened, a while ago when we were on our way to meet the individual that we had planned to meet, Khizr. But I did not inform you because of Shaitan making me forget about this. So both of these occasions we see the same phrase, here or there. So the point I'm trying to make, a righteous deed a person intends to do, forgetting, although it's part of human nature to forget. But oftentimes because Shaitan does not want us to carry out good intentions, good actions, and it is due to that. And therefore, Allah has referred to this act of his forgetfulness towards Shaitan. فَأَنْسَاهُ الشَّيْطَانِ ذِكْرَ رَبِّهِ فَلَبِثَ فِي السِّجْنِ بِضَعَ سِنِينَ. And as a result, Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam remained for a few more years in the prison. We looked at, dear brothers and sisters, yesterday at length the interpretation, the science of dream itself, in light of the ahadith of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the types of dream, and the symptoms and the signs which would make a dream a noble and good and pious dream versus a dream that is going to be considered as evil dream or nightmare. There were lessons that remained from these ayat to explore. I want to go over briefly because the goal for us, as we read and recite this surah, is to learn the lessons from the surah. As Allah said, ayatun lis-sa'ilin. There are signs and reflections and lessons and gems that a person can extract from this surah. And ayat of the Quran in general offer that, in particular this surah. So what are some of the lessons that we can extract from and relate to? The first and foremost lesson that is very powerful one is that, honor for the pious in all condition. As the scholars of tafsir have stated, the pious individual will always be seen as pious and noble, irrespective of the situation and the condition the person may be found in. What do I mean by that? Generally, when we think of prison and a prisoner, how do we associate the person who is found in the prison? A criminal, for example, somebody who is a sinner, and therefore he is serving the sentence. But is it the case when we look at the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, when he ended up in prison, al-iyadu billah, did he breach any act of nobility and piety in his life, much less than violating a law of the land or a divine law? Did he do anything like that? No. So apparently when we tend to judge people because of the circumstances they are found in, that doesn't necessarily mean the person is evil or the person is good. So it could be either ways. So what makes or helps us decide in this regard is the person's character itself. If the character of the person is noble and there is nothing known for the person, then regardless of the situation he or she may be found in, we have to give the deserved respect to them. And therefore, ulama, they have made this point very clearly, highlighting this aspect that, we should not be demonizing, we should not be degrading the people who are serving the sentence without knowing genuinely the real cause of that. Because it could be someone by mistake ended up there. It could be that for some other reasons the person ended up in jail. And in the case of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, this is exactly what happened. Because they wanted him, I mean basically the women, to commit a sin. And he avoided that. He abstained from that. And that basically was a crime in their eyes for him to be put in prison. But that was definitely an act of piety on his end to resist this temptation and to stay strong. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make people, go through situations as per His divine wisdom, but you and I may be not able to bear that, but people of piety, subhanAllah, they bear all of those difficult tests and trials that they undergo with dignity, with patience, and also with wisdom. So that is the very important lesson that we learn. And if we look at our tradition, our Islamic tradition, many of the ulama, many of the great scholars of our tradition served sentence in different ways. Whether it was Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, whether it was Imam Malik rahimahullah, or other ulama, I was going to actually bring a book, but I forgot. It is a book on fiqh, and it's a great book. It's like a encyclopedia in nature on the Masail al-Fiqhiyya, the jurisprudential rulings. And it is called Al-Mabsut lis-Sarakhsi, one of the great Hanafi jurists from Central Asia. So he was imprisoned because of one of his strong positions that he took against the ruler of the time. So the type of imprisonment that he had was not the way we understand today. How was he imprisoned? He was what the Amir had decreed for him, that there was a well that was deserted, dry well, deep. So the imprisonment, that it was a very unique type of punishment that he gave. So he was dropped inside. He was put inside the dry well, and everything that he needed will be basically served from the top. For example, food, water. But he cannot get out of that well. He will be just there day in and day out, day and night. And he was in that state for several years like that. And the people of ilm, they value their time. They value their time, right? And subhanAllah, so while being in that state, there was not a restriction for people to, especially his students, to go and check on him and to see him. The decree wasn't such that nobody could go. Of course, there were certain individuals allowed. So his students who used to study with him prior to him being imprisoned in that deserted well, they reach out to him. We would like to still continue our lessons and learning with you. So while he would be inside that well, as imprisoned, he will give them lessons and teach them from the bottom of the well, and the students will be right around. And the way he taught, subhanAllah, it is the book that I'm referring to, this whole book, pretty much most of it came out as a result of his lesson that he taught from the well. And if you look at each chapter of the book, whether it is Kitab al-Tahara, Kitab al-Salat, at the end, he makes this dua. The one who is imprisoned, may Allah release him from the prison and may Allah have mercy on him. He is making dua for himself after ending and completing his lesson. And this Al-Mabsut that I'm referring you to is like voluminous books, subhanAllah, compendium type, like encyclopedia. It's like in 23 or 24 volumes. They valued the time like this. And another great scholar, a very recent time from Indian subcontinent, this was from one of the Central Asian scholar. The scholar that is very much known to at least many of us, Maulana Maududi rahimahullah, he was also imprisoned because of his political activism. And when he was in prison, part of the tafsir he wrote while he was in the prison. Tafhim al-Quran, this very popular tafsir, he wrote a significant portion of it while being in the prison. Another great scholar that most of us know from Indo-Pak, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, he wrote a book, it's called Ghubar-e-Khatir. It's a very eloquent, and very fasih book in terms of the articulation of the content and the topic. And the book is like of this size. It is all about, subhanAllah, that while he was in the prison, observing a bird, subhanAllah, trying to make the nest. And he wrote the book observing those movements and the intelligence of the bird. It is all about ghubar khatir, the dust of the heart. That's what it means. Ghubar refers to the dust and particles of the dust. Khatir, the dust and particles of the reflections of one person observing certain things. So there are numerous books that have come out as a result of imprisonment of many of the ulama and sulaha. So that shows how they valued time. How they valued time, right? And when we are free, we still waste our time. Despite being free, freedom to learn, freedom to move, freedom to worship, yet we find millions of excuses. And those who were imprisoned and had no option, and all the excuses were there for them from the religious point of view versus also the other point of view. But they were not the people of lame excuses. So it is something really to learn from. And Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam definitely set a beautiful example, being in the prison and also using that as an opportunity to teach and preach the Tawheed, the doctrine of Tawheed. Right? So the important point is pious people will remain pious whether they are in prison or in the masjid, outside of masjid, in the market or at home. Because the state will not be judged, or the situation will not be judged because of what they are in. That is number one important point that we learn and as a lesson. And the other thing that we learn is that beliefs and practices, only from the divine, subhanAllah, revelation. One of the things that we note, Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam said to his cellmates, and he said to them that وَاتَّبَعْتُ مِلَّةَ آبَاءِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ مَا كَانَ لَنَا أَن نُشْرِكَ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ ذَلِكَ مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ عَلَيْنَا وَعَلَى النَّاسِ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ. And he also says, إِنِّي تَرَكْتُ مِلَّةَ قَوْمٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ كَافِرُونَ. This idea that majority constitute the authority to follow. That's actually the secular perspective. That is the secular perspective. Because democracy is by the people, of the people, and for the people. But when it comes to Sharia, even if you have, this is why Allama ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala says something very powerful, that do not be duped by the majority of the people, what they follow, what they do. It could be that they all are following the path of Jahannam. And oftentimes the path of Jannah is the path that, subhanAllah, that is the path that is abandoned by majority. And you will see oftentimes seldom people walking on it. So do not be confused and duped by this attitude that, because majority is doing it, and therefore it is okay. No. Look at the condition of the society we are in. If we judge by this standard, all haram will become halal. All the things that are disliked will become absolutely the praiseworthy acts. So we do not go by this standard. And therefore, Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam said, he said, إِنِّي تَرَكْتُ مِلَّةَ قَوْمٍ. I abandoned the way of the qawm. Why did he abandon? Majority was on that path. The reason he abandoned, because he says, لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ, because they do not follow Allah. They do not believe in Allah. And they do not have the divine teachings to abide by. And therefore for me it doesn't matter whether I'm all alone facing this challenge or I have the whole society with me. Because to me, my goal is to please my Rabb, not to please the people. That's the bottom line. This idea, peer pressure, is all about pressure from people. But our deen teaches that you must remain firm and strong on your principles, especially when it comes to your faith, especially when it comes to haram and halal. That really shows your unwavering commitment to your faith, how you perceive your faith, and how you go about it. So the source for us to judge what is right versus what is wrong, what is halal versus what is haram, iman versus kufr, it is Quran and Sunnah. Whether we have people on board with us or not, that is irrelevant. And that is why we make this as an authoritative binding ruling for us. And therefore, we should be very much cautious when we live in a society of such liberalism, where religious values and moral values are frowned upon, degraded and deserted and rejected, because that does not necessarily mean that what they are doing is right. And the other thing is that if you live in a society where unfortunately people are mubtadi'een, who are introducing religious concepts in the deen that has nothing to do with the deen. So that is also another aspect to be very cautious about. For example, there are people who, sometimes you become part of the community in jama'ah, that they have in the name of religion practices that is completely divorced from the Sharia. There is no way to justify that. In the name of tasawwuf, in the name of suluk, in the name of zuhud, in the name of different things. So all of those are, as Rasulullah said, "Man ahdatha fi amrina hada ma laysa minhu fahuwa raddun." Anyone who will introduce something new in the religion that wasn't from it, fahuwa raddun, it is going to be fully rejected, and that is going to be seen as a ibtida' fi deen, innovation in deen, and that person will be held seriously accountable. What narration says, on the day of judgment, when people will be lined up to receive the drink from Hawz al-Kawthar, this very sweet, whiter than milk, sweeter than honey, to receive it from the blessed hand of Rasulullah ﷺ from the Kawthar pool. And as people will be lined up, the believers and then Rasulullah ﷺ will be welcoming them. As he would be welcoming them, one by one will be having the honor to receive it. And there will be angels also as guards for Rasulullah ﷺ will be standing there. And there will be individuals who will come forward, and then Rasulullah ﷺ would say, "Come, come." And then the angels would say to Rasulullah ﷺ, what would they say? They would say, they although are part of your ummah, but you do not know what they have done to your religion after you left the dunya. And then they will say to Rasulullah ﷺ, they created bid'at in the deen. They innovated practices in the name of religion and made that as part of the religion. Then when Rasulullah ﷺ, when he will hear this, his face will change. It will cause fury in him. And then he will say, "Suh and suh, get away from me, get away from me." Being so close to have the honor of receiving this, but then fully being rejected in that manner. Why? Because we, or not me, whoever did this, had the audacity to change the religion, has really done a grave sin. Because Sharia is the domain of Allah. And the representative of that is none other than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is why it is very important, this second important lesson to be mindful of. And the third lesson that we learn as a believer, especially being the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, actively seeking and searching for the opportunities to share our faith with others. Right? Opportunities for giving da'wah. That's what I'm trying to say. Because what clearly learn from the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam is these two cell inmates that approached him. Did they come to him to please teach us the religion? No. What did they come to him for? They wanted to, as they observed him as the man of piety, vast knowledge, nobility, they wanted to know simply the interpretation of the dream. That's all they wanted to know. But when they approached him, Yusuf ﷺ saw that as a perfect opportunity, knowing, although they want to know something that I will inshallah educate them about and inform them about, but they are in greater need to know something a lot more crucial than that, which is to know their Rabb, to know their Creator, who created them. And it is this that is going to help them secure their salvation in the hereafter. A person of wisdom, a person of piety will be able to prioritize what is most important, what is least important, and what is in between. Because it is like a child. Child would ask whatever he or she would think, they would like to know, they would need. But for the parents, they need to judge what is best for them and what is most important for them. You don't go for each and every demand of the child. Similarly, for us as Muslims, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has assigned this lofty responsibility for us. That is to share the message of Islam with others. Kuntum khayra ummatin, this laqab, this title that is given to us, being the best of the nations, is for this reason, as we know. And dear brothers and sisters, we live in a country where there are ample opportunities for this. You don't have to be an imam, you don't have to be in the masjid, especially when you are working out in your workforce, in your workplace, and whether you are driving, whether you are at the store, you could see many, many opportunities like that. And part of the reason that Allah has brought us here, if we really have this religious mindset, then you would give the reasoning for your stay here a religious one by saying, Allah wanted me to be here so that, of course, the dunya will come, but primarily for me to preach, to share the religion with others. And this option and opportunity is not given to everyone. I mean, if you were to live in Saudi Arabia, for example, or in the Muslim world, will you have that opportunity? Because you have all Muslims around you. There is no non-Muslim. There are people who wish to have this option, but they don't, because their environment does not make it possible. But for us, alhamdulillah, we have that option. But yet, we do have, even the least is, I remind myself, first and foremost, and all of us, the least haqq that we owe in this regard is to two people. Number one, our neighbors. Number two is our co-workers. Right? So neighbors, co-workers, and then of course that includes your friends. These are the two people that you have stayed with in close proximity for long enough, for weeks and months and years, and they don't even know anything about you as a Muslim. What they do, they know you. In fact, many of the time they know many of us as a troublemaker neighbors, who unfortunately when they have guests, all they do is the mess, creating troubles in terms of the time, the night, and the noise and whatnot. But there is no good expression and impression that we leave on them through our religion. Right? The Christians, this is subhanAllah something that we can learn from, although it is not right Islamically, that when the season of Christmas comes, they share the greeting with everyone, saying Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. Even those who don't believe in Christmas, they don't believe in Christianity, they do so. But for us, for example, Ramadan is the perfect opportunity to share the message of Islam and Ramadan, and occasion of Eid, to explain to them at least by sharing the greetings and also sharing the gifts with them on the occasion of Eid. That could be the most powerful way to introduce them, that they will know, look, what a civilized, simple, and very modest celebration that the Muslims have. And there is very few religious traditions have as civilized, as simple, as humble, modest celebrations as we do, which revolves around nothing but the prayer and praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to be active in this regard. And you don't have to be a scholar. You could simply explain a few points, and then you connect to the person, to the imam, for example, or a sheikh, whichever way, or maybe by giving them some literature. But we must do this, otherwise if Allah were to ask on the Day of Judgment, you had so many non-Muslim neighbors around you, did you ever speak to them about Islam? And if any of our neighbors says, this person I lived next to for so long, he never ever said anything about Islam. So what answer will we have to give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So that is another important lesson that we can learn from this, as Yusuf alayhi salam preached Tawheed to his cell inmates. And the other lesson that we learn is that taking help first and foremost from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seeking help primarily, number one, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this regard, when Yusuf alayhi salam requested one of his cellmates, when he was being released from the prison, to go and mention of me to your master, because he knows about my situation and case. So Imam Tabari rahimahullah ta'ala in his tafsir says, part of the reason that he forgot and the prison stay, the sentence for Yusuf alayhi salam prolonged his stay in prison, because he first, instead of seeking directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, turned to a human being for help from a human being. Previous case, where when he was in the palace, surrounded by all the temptation and traps by Zulaykha and other women, who did he turn to first? It was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ. And it was that connection and reliance on Allah, Allah helped him miraculously without having any support around. Right? He was all alone, but Allah found a way for him. But in this case, as Imam Tabari rahimahullah ta'ala says, one of the possible reasons that this individual had forgotten and his stay in prison prolonged because he turned first to a human being to seek his help before turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore Rasulullah in his ummah wanted to establish this type of connection between abd and ma'bud. For each and everything, before you resort to the means, you turn to the one who creates the means, and that is Allah. And the very known narration in this case is, Prophet said, فَلْيَسْأَلْ رَبَّهُ حَاجَتَهُ كُلَّهَا حَتَّى يَسْأَلْ شِسْعَنَ عَلَيْهِ إِذَا انْقَطَعَ. This is a very beautiful, profound example. He said, فَلْيَسْأَلْ رَبَّهُ حَاجَتَهُ كُلَّهَا فَلْيَسْأَلْ أَحَدُكُمْ. That each and every one of you, when you have a need, the first thing you should think of and turn to is Allah. Of course, you will be resorting to the means. For example, whatever it may be, the medicine, the grocery, and all of those things. But before you go about accomplishing that, you turn to Allah first, asking Him to facilitate ease. You don't say, Allah, fix my shoes. You say, Allah, allow me, provide me the means that I am able to fulfill my need. That's how you do. And then Rasulullah gave the example of what? He gave the lowest of the low example, something that is very insignificant in our eyes. He said, even the lace of your shoe, if that is to be broken, which is a very simple thing. Not about, you need $1 million, or you need a house, you need a car, you need to get married, you need a job. All of those things are lofty status, lofty things. But this, as simple as this, because generally we don't think it, or we should be even asking Allah for. He said, he gave that example that as simple as this, you should still turn to Allah and ask for. So what about the grave matters? Definitely you need to turn to Allah first. So it is this thing that is very, very important that we learn from this aspect of the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. And therefore Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, لو لم يقل يوسف الكلمة التي قال ما لبث في السجن طول ما لبث حتى يبتغي الفرج من عند غير الله. What Yusuf alayhi salam said, اذكرني عند ربك. Had he not said that to his cellmate, he could have been released from the prison a lot faster and earlier than that. Simply because, what we also, of course, it is not haram and wrong to do that, right? He didn't commit a sin. But Anbiya, they are role models for others. Anbiya, they serve as a good model for others to emulate. And therefore their test and accountability is also very severe. And we can see in this regard, Rasulullah, what did he say? إِنَّ أَشَدَّ النَّاسِ بَلَاءً الْأَنْبِيَا. The people who are tested severely are the Anbiya. And then those who follow their footsteps closely. And we can learn from the Sirat also of Rasulullah when Mushrikeen of Makkah came asking Rasulullah about a question. And then Rasulullah said, I will respond to you tomorrow. I will respond to you tomorrow. And he turned them away by saying tomorrow. And he did not say inshallah. That's all. All what he did was, he said, I will tell you tomorrow, because he was confident that because it is a religious matter and the wahi will come from Allah and will solve this issue and help me answer the question to the mushrikeen. And this way he would be doing a great service to earn their trust and heart to Islam. But what did he forget to say? Inshallah. And therefore the wahi paused for days, and to a point that mushrikeen start to mock at Rasulullah. This type of severe accountability to teach the lesson that Anbiya, they should be at the highest level and pedestal to serve as a good model. And then Allah revealed the ayat and answer also for the question that they had asked. But then one of the ayat that came down, وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. You must not say, وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ. You must not say that you will do something tomorrow unless you say, Insha'Allah. To teach an important lesson. So Anbiya, they are tested severely. And therefore we see in this case, when Yusuf a.s. turned to this individual, according to this tafsir, it prolonged his stay not by few hours or few days or weeks or months, rather few years. He stayed in prison for an extra few years as a result of that. So turning to Allah first and foremost is the important lesson that we learn from, from this. And the last but not least is another important lesson, approaching people who are suitable for the task. When you want to seek help from human being, of course within the limitations, you should be wise enough to choose the person who is, number one, you are well-wisher, number two, competent, number three, who has the experience or the means to help you out. You don't want to turn to people who are not well-wishers. You don't want to turn to people who are merely there for the talk service, for the lip service basically, but they will not be of your any help and benefit. And that is the lesson that we learned. So Yusuf ﷺ chose this individual. Why did he choose? He could have chosen somebody else, because he knew that this person will be reinstated in his position to serve the king. And it is the king who has the authority to release me from the prison. Right? And he also saw in him that because he did a favor to him by interpreting his dream, he will be his well-wisher, because he helped him out. And that is going to basically help him to get his need done. That is another lesson to learn. And therefore, subhanAllah, Muslim ibn Qutayba, rahimahullah ta'ala, advised his son. And this is a beautiful advice that he gave to his son by saying, O my son, لا تطلبن حاجتك إلى واحد من ثلاثة. When you have a need that you want somebody else to fulfill, make sure you do not ask of your need from three people, from three types of people. From three types of people. Who are they? Number one, لا تطلبها إلى الكذاب. فإنه يقربها وهي بعيدة ويبعدها وهي قريبة. And there are some people very good in their words. So somebody who is a liar, professional liar, what will he do? So he said, do not approach him for help. What he will do then, a dishonest person, because he will make it look easy when it is difficult. Because he's a habitual liar, something which is very difficult. Oh, don't worry, it will get done. But the next day when it comes, don't worry, it will get done. Just he will continue on pushing it. Or when something that is so simple, he may make it more complicated. Oh, it is too difficult, because he wants to just scare you off. Somebody who is a habitual liar, he will just play with words. So do not approach him for this, he says. And the second type of person, وَلَا تَطْلُبُهَا إِلَى الْأَحْمَقِ فَإِنَّهُ يُرِيدُ أَن يَنْفَعُكَ وَهُوَ يَضُرُّكَ. And do not reach out for help, subhanAllah, a foolish individual, somebody who is not very smart. Although he is sincere in his intention to help you out, but his intention is not going to do much because of his incompetence in this regard. So despite his intention, he may bring more harm to you than the benefit. So that is why he said you should stay away from those types of people. And the third one is, لا تطلبها إلى رجل له عند قوم مأكلة. Do not approach a person who owes others. For example, somebody who owes money or favors and whatnot. So if you approach that person, then what he will do, he will use your need as a shield to get his own needs done. Look, I'm helping you, doing this favor to you. So you in turn, for example, excuse me from my loan, excuse me from this commitment to this. So these are the three types of people we should be very careful about not reaching out to them. And the last point that we also learn from this, أَنْسَاهُ الشَّيْطَانُ, as the person in the cell inmate said, because shaitan made me forget. Forgetfulness is part of human nature, as I mentioned before. But what is important to note, one is to be lazy, then to be forgetful. Somebody who forgot is a genuine excuse. Even Sharia will not blame the person for that. So even as important as prayer, something like that. But somebody who is lazy, and as a result of laziness, he is just finding excuse, although he says he forgot, but Allah knows the intention. And the person, although says, I forgot this, I forgot about it, but because Allah knows the internal reality of the person's heart, then he may be held accountable because of the reality of the matter that he is hiding behind the words. So therefore Rasulullah said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ تَجَاوَزَ عَنْ أُمَّتِي الْخَطَأَ وَالنِّسْيَانِ. Prophet said, this is in all scenarios and cases. Allah has overlooked and forgiven my ummah for khata, a mistake that is not done deliberately, and nisyan, that you do something out of forgetfulness, or you forgot to do something. And both of these things are excused. And وَمَسْتُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ, and something that you are forced to do by the authority, for example. And Islamically it is not right, but you are forced to do that. As a result of that pressure, if somebody has carried out an act, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the reality, therefore the person will not be held accountable. So we leave, these are the lessons, inshallah, we end today, and the reflections that we had from these ayat, these valuable lessons, whether it is about forgetfulness, whether it is about the amal of da'wah, sharing the message of Islam with others, whether it's about turning to Allah first, or whether about judging the people based on the conditions, rather than judging them based on the qualities that they have. All of these are very relevant lessons to our lives, and we hope and pray that we adorn our lives with these beautiful lessons, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to act upon it. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah we'll continue tomorrow. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayh. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.